Welcome to another podcast episode. I'm the host, Bill Reel. I'm sitting down with Carol Hollowell. Carol, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a little windy today, but other than that, it's a good day.
It is really nice to sit down with you. I've known of you for years, and I think you've known of me for years. And I think this is the first time we're talking face to face. We might have seen each other once or twice before, just in greeting somewhere, but this is the first time we've had kind of an extended conversation. So I'm
Yeah,
excited to spend some time with you this morning.
yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and the reason we've got you on is, and just for the viewers slash listeners, is that Carol started a project. I think is it 8 years ago?
Yeah, just about 8 years ago. Yeah.
8 years ago, where
2014.
you attempted to tackle homelessness here in southern Utah, and I just about a month ago, maybe a little less than that, was at a function where you were trying to raise awareness and raise financial support for a nonprofit that you founded and run. And when I sat through that, I had an idea of what SwitchPoint was, which we'll get into in a moment what it is. But I had an idea of what SwitchPoint was. And then you guys blew my mind. You guys are doing the most incredible stuff. And I wanted to give you a chance to share that because I think as I've looked at everything you're doing and looking to do here in the next year or so, you're really taking this far-reaching approach to tackling this issue within our geographic area where I live, and I think you've got real solutions. And I just want to talk this morning about the problem of homelessness and what's going on there, what it takes to address it, the things you guys are doing. And before we do that, is there any maybe like a brief intro or a bio or anything you want to say about yourself so that people get a feel for you?
Sure. Well, I moved here to southern Utah in 2009 with my husband, and we have 4 sons, but 2 of our sons were already out of the house at the time. We came from Oregon, Bend, Oregon, and we had just gone through the mortgage meltdown, which I hope is not coming again. But we were trying to find a fresh start and somewhere warm and sunny. So we just threw a dart at a map, and that's where we ended up. We didn't know anybody, and thought this is a great place to restart. And here we are in sunny St. George. What was hard was we were having to reinvent ourselves, and both of us had to find jobs. It was, I think, easier for me to find a job, and my husband ended up going to North Dakota to work in the oil field, like many of men did at that time. And 2 of our 2 oldest boys went with him to North Dakota, and I ended up staying here and finding a job. Worked at Pride County Association of Governments for a while as the volunteer director, and that's really what launched. I started seeing volunteers who were court ordered and having to volunteer because they were sleeping in the park and trespassing and public intoxication. And so it really started that journey of, there's a homeless problem here and maybe I could fix it. So that's kind of my journey
Yeah,
that led
yeah.
me here.
When we moved here 7 years ago, I came from a city that was much more urban, and I really didn't see a homeless problem at all. It was really strange. Of course, the housing was much more affordable, and I think the city, because it was a lower income, more poverty prevalent, there were a lot more community resources kind of tackling that. And when we moved out here, it surprised me because every time you go to fill up gas at the Maverick or whatnot, you have folks who are in that situation, and your heart goes out to them. And I'll just share a little personal story. I love my mom. She died about 3 years ago from cancer, and incredible woman. I couldn't say enough good things about her, but she didn't have patience for the complexity of life. And I remember one time being at a baseball game, and on the way out, there was a man who asked my mom if she had any change or something that she could spare, right? And my mom just immediately, like this, she was like, "Go get a job," you know? And it just struck me. I was a young kid at the time, and it just struck me that something else is going on here, that we could easily look at other people as having the same mindset and opportunities that we had. And the reality is every life is different. And I often think on this side of life that we really are everyone else, just under a different set of circumstances and different disposition. And so I walked away from that experience not quite getting why my mom did it, and kind of getting why my mom did it in terms of how she was. Um, she had a hard life, and she figured out how to get herself to a spot where she was able to provide for our family and do things. And she just didn't have any tolerance for the complexity of life not being what she thought it should be. And as time has gone on, I've spent a lot of time thinking about humanity and how messy it is. And I guess a good place to start off is maybe just to have you tell us what the problem is like here in Southern Utah, or maybe Utah in general, in regards to homelessness, and what you think is going on there, and how people who maybe think like my mom, how they could maybe see the problem differently, and maybe see a little more humanity here.
Absolutely. And Bill, you hit it spot on. There's a lot of education that needs to happen, because it's not necessarily ignorance. It's a lack of the understanding of the reasons why. And we all are there sometimes because we're in our own little bubbles, right? And I was the same way until I got into it and then started realizing every year homeless providers across the nation have to participate in what's called a point in time. And in January, it's always the last Wednesday of January, we have to do a point in time count. And we beat the streets in the middle of the night. And we have to point, and count all the homeless folks we can find. And it's not a perfect method by any means. In fact, I think it's very imperfect, because it's hard to find people in the middle of the night, and it's dangerous, right? But it's what they've been doing for years. And in the report they haven't put out the 21 numbers, but in 2020, and you can find it on a website that you can post up there as jobs.utah.gov, and homelessness. But there were 7,433 homeless individuals for the first time in 2020 in Utah. And there were 10,846 sheltered this year in 2020. And during the point in time count, we had in our state 2,410 on that one single night, and 1,155 unsheltered on the street. So if you can kind of see that difference in one night, when people can go out and try and count, you can find 1,100 of them. But if you look at the whole year of what we actually served as providers, we were serving almost 11,000, right? And so it's an interesting little statistic there. Washington County served a little over 1,000 during that same time period of 2020. We only have one shelter here in Washington County. And then in 21 and 22, what we've seen, and that report will come out probably around July, we have seen a dramatic increase and rise in homelessness due to being priced out. And you touched on that when you were talking about prices of homes were low in the beginning, and then we've seen just housing costs have just gone crazy. But our seniors and our vets who are on a fixed income have had very little options. And so just this year, we've seen a 53% increase in our seniors becoming homeless and knocking on our door. Right now, our oldest homeless person is 92. And that should make every one of your listeners, sick to their stomach. I don't know about you, but my dad turns 80 and this year in June. And I would just be mortified if he was on the street homeless, because I'm thinking these are people who worked hard their whole life. And maybe they, didn't have an incredible job and didn't have big investments. They just worked, and then they got their little pension or they got their Social Security, and that's what they thought they needed. And now they're being priced out, because every time a landlord can increase their rent, or they were in a mobile home for a while and those get sold out and redeveloped, they've been priced out. So we'll talk about reasons of homelessness, because I think there's a huge misconception on what are the reasons of homelessness. We think, oh, bums, right? People are drug addicts, or they want to be homeless. I'm going to tell you that what I've seen in the 8 years and I live this every day. I work 7 days a week. Mental illness. Mental illness impacts more than 80% of the population that I serve, and I've seen over 8,000 people. And so when you talk about mental illness, that is a huge issue that's not being addressed in our nation. And then we talk about substance use. And so when you have mental illness that doesn't get addressed and they don't have insurance, then they have to self-medicate. And then they get hooked on it. And so, and there's a lot of people who just are, using substance anyways. But you have those two things become the number one reasons for homelessness. And then we look at domestic violence, and we look at being priced out. Excuse me. But I'm going to tell you what I think. I think the number one reason for homelessness is the catastrophic loss of family. Because those reasons that I just mentioned before are documented in their data, and people check the boxes of why they're homeless. But when we have lost support of family, and we see people getting, booted to the curb for one of those reasons, or what happened in, it started with, you look at the Dust Bowl, and, when we first started having financial problems, our first Great Depression, and families started splitting apart just because of financial hardships. And we've lost connection to family. When I grew up, all my cousins lived on the same street, right? And now I have 7 kids in my family, and not one of us live in the same state. So that loss of connection to family, of who picks you up when you're having a problem, who picks you up when you're the alcoholic, who picks you up when you're the schizophrenic. We don't have that anymore. We don't have that tight-knit group anymore that's really picking each other up. And so what's happened is the environment it's the shelter's problem to be the connection. I look at the solutions of, okay, now what, right? What has to happen now? We have to build communities. And Bill, I think that's really when I got into this whole thing is, I was looking for my own community myself. And I thought, these people need me as much as I need them. And that's maybe where I can find a better outcome is if I can help them find a tribe and find success and find support and love, maybe they'll switch their habits and their behaviors, and we'll have some successful outcomes. And that's exactly what started happening. And, people say, well, where does the name SwitchPoint come from? And it was because on a train track, if you can change the direction, that little mechanism on the train, it changes the tracks. And as I started working with these people and listening to them and saying, okay, you don't have family, there's no one I can call. I'm writing down I'm listening to them and saying, tell me everything. Tell me everything that is going on in your life. And I'm trying to get to know these clients. And then I say, if I could fix one thing today, then would you give me a chance? And they're like, okay. So if I said, okay, I found your ID. We were able to order some ID today. So now you'll have a state ID. That little switch of trust allowed them to open up and have this relationship to say, okay, I'm going to do what you say, and allowed us to case manage, right? So to me, that reestablishing of a tribe, reestablishing of a community has led SwitchPoint into this ability to not quickly, but really quickly assess what somebody needs, right? And hopefully move people into some stability and into some permanent housing once we can identify why they've become homeless.
When this all first started, Carol, what was the original idea? I mean, I'm only imagining that this has gotten so much more, so much larger, and doing so much more than you originally had planned to kind of do. And I'm just curious, like, what was the original, like, hey, here's the idea. Let's do this thing and see where it goes. And then we'll talk about all the places it has gone.
Yeah, the original idea was, you know, seeing this gentleman on the sidewalk, and maybe I'll share that story real quick. I was driving to work, and you know, it was cold and it was raining, and I saw this old gentleman scraggly on the sidewalk in a wheelchair, and it was cold, and I just felt like I got to turn around, and so I did. I turned around and I just kind of rolled down my window and I said, "Hey, where are you going?" And "I'm going to Smith's to warm up and get a cup of coffee." And he was over by the St. George Library and by a bush. And I said, "Are you living there?" And he says, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, geez, let me load your wheelchair into my truck and I'm going to take you to get a cup of coffee." And I don't know why, because normally, you know, you'd be a little intimidated and a little scared because it's dark and you're putting this, you know, homeless guy in your truck, but I just felt like I needed to do it. And as I started talking to him, I realized just by asking him, "Why are you living in that bush?" and what happened? And he says, "I lost my wallet." I said, "When?" 5 years ago. Bill, it blew my mind. And I'm like, 5 years ago, you live in this city and nobody's asked you that you needed help or anything? 5 years and you couldn't get to the DMV? And he says, "No." And our DMV is like 16 miles away and there's not a bus that goes there. And so I'm like, okay, but nobody asked if you needed help. And so I just said to him, "You know what? Today's the day. I'm going to figure this out. And we're going to get you some stinking ID. And Ray, I'm going to get you into housing." And I was just like, I'm going to figure this out, because I could not believe this guy was homeless because he had lost his wallet.
Yeah.
That launched my mission. And so it took us 7.5 hours. I called the 2 girls that worked for me and I said, this is what we're doing. And so I had to go to the police station because he'd been arrested 63 times for trespassing and living in a bush and public intoxication. And they wouldn't give me the ID. And then I went to his bank because we knew he had disability, but they couldn't give me his ID. And then I went to the Social Security office and they gave me a copy of his Medicaid, but they couldn't give me a copy of his ID. So finally I get to the DMV with him. And because he doesn't have 2 pieces of mail, no, we can't give it to him. I'm crying, he's crying. And finally the little gal at DMV says, "Fine, give me $18 and I'll give you his temporary ID." And he looks at it, he starts to cry, and he's like, "That's me." He hadn't seen himself on anything for 5 years. And that was my switch point. That was my moment of going, holy crap, I know what I got to do for the rest of my life. So I called up the city and I said, I gotta change something here. And I need to pitch you something. And will you give me a chance? And they did. They really said, "You're right. We got to do something different." And 3 months later, we had found a building, which is where we're at today. We used some community development block grant money to purchase it. And we launched the plan of opening a shelter, but designing it as a community resource center to have a lot of collaboration with other agencies to, you know, help get IDs, you know, help get them into housing, do job trainings, that kind of thing, right? But then you're saying, did I have an idea past that? Not at the moment. But within 6 months of that, I realized nobody will hire these people. Nobody would give them a chance.
Right. So you put a roof over their head, but you're not really fixing anything. And really, for these folks to be back on their feet, they have to have their own income coming in, and they have to have somebody who has the patience, especially as you're listing it, that mental illness is the perhaps the number one contributor, and as you pointed out, also catastrophic loss of family, and those two probably to some degree go hand in hand, because I think we're all fragile, right? The right sort of kinds of circumstances could come along, and we all have breaking points, and some of these folks, and maybe a majority of them, struggle with mental illness from a young age or, you know, young adulthood. Beautiful. So the first thing you did was to create this shelter, and we're going to just kind of put a little slideshow kind of up on the screen. It's just websites, but we'll see them switch around. The shelter itself, this was the first thing you did. How many folks can we have in this building?
So it's 84 beds in
Okay.
the St. George shelter, and we have men, women, and families. So it's the whole gamut. And we also have our soup kitchen here, and then we decided, oh geez, we need our food pantry here. So we, within that first year, opened up a food pantry, and I wrote a couple grants, and we built a large pantry in the backyard.
Yeah, I'm just amazed by what you've done. So the shelter has 84 beds. Do you know roughly, are you usually around full capacity? What's the
We're always full. Yeah, we're always
always
full.
full?
In fact, we're writing a grant right now. City Council came in February and had voted to allow us to do an expansion, and so we're drawing up some plans. We're trying to add on 44 more beds because we've been full since the day we opened, even though we're turning them through and getting them into housing as fast as we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. 84 beds, and you're hoping to add another 44.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. And what kind of services, if somebody's homeless in Southern Utah and they find their way to the shelter, what are we doing with folks there to help them out? Like, again, we'll go piece by piece.
Sure.
I just want people to see this 20,000 foot view of all the things you're doing and where you're having an impact. And I've got questions at various points, but yeah. So in terms of the shelter, what does it do for somebody? What is the average standard kind of interaction there?
So the standard interaction is somebody would come in and we ask them really what do they need, right? And I look at it as like a sushi menu of, you tell me, because the typical experience for somebody in homelessness is somebody telling them what is wrong, what do they need, and to me that has been the problem, because I need to say, Bill, you tell me what has been going on with you, and what you check these boxes, and it might be that you lost your ID, but it also might be I just need some time to chill, and then I'll come out of my shell and tell you my PTSD experience. But so we let the client check the boxes of the things that they think they need, and then we can start that plan. Our requirements are that they would meet with a case manager, and that begins this action plan. So we have 17 classes that they can attend, from addiction, like recovery classes, parenting classes. We have a great circles program that matches them up with a mentor, like a middle class mentor, so that they can learn some strategies if they're in a family. We've got budgeting classes. We do a Dave Ramsey style, financial piece. So we got all kinds of things that they can participate in. We've got a job shadow program, so they can hop into any of our businesses and do job shadow training. That allows them during their 6 weeks of job shadowing to build up a resume and a reference. And we say, this person showed up on time. We say, hey, you don't smell very good today. Go back to the shelter, take a shower, put your deodorant on, come back. So we're teaching them those skills, those soft skills that they might have lost. If someone's been chronically homeless for more than 5 years, they lose a lot of those soft skills, like showing up on time, smelling good, brushing their teeth, how to interact with people. And so we reintroduce all of those things so that an employer is going to accept them back, right? And not fire them in their first 3 days at McDonald's. Yeah. And then we say to them at the end of 6 weeks, are you ready? And then we can give them a letter of, certificate, basically, to say, hey, they passed our job shadow program and they're ready to move on. Or maybe we end up hiring them in one of our own businesses.
Love it. Love it. Beautiful. Is there a time frame on how you said 6 weeks? Is there folks who stay at the shelter longer because that's really the only place for them? How does that work?
Yeah, sometimes we try and move them out as quickly as possible because shelter is not a place for permanent living. No. But we have had people that have been here longer than that because it's just been impossible to place them. But we've had people that have been here, 20 days because they're easier to place, or we found them, reconnection to family, or they've been able to find a roommate. But we don't place a time frame like 30 days and you're out. We don't do that.
Yeah, totally get it. All right, so there's the shelter. You mentioned the soup kitchen as being part of that, so I'll skip over. Let me see where I've got this. Right there. So the soup kitchen, you added.
Yeah, let me bring up the soup kitchen for a second, because we had an amazing relationship with the Grace Episcopal Church for many, many years. And the soup kitchen was originally there. And during COVID, it was a real hardship. We weren't allowed to, many congregations had to shut down during COVID, and they have an elderly population. And so we brought the soup kitchen during COVID to the campus and ended up just leaving it here. So the soup kitchen now serves about 120 during lunchtime that are from the community and not just our shelter population. But the soup kitchen is open to anybody in the community that wants to come and have a meal with us. And so when we're doing our expansion, we're also building a large kitchen that will feed actually more people.
Gotcha. And obviously an important thing, like some folks aren't going to really be benefited by the shelter per se. And those folks, you obviously have to feed to some degree, but you also have other folks who really just maybe need a hot meal.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they're living on, we have a lot of people in our community who live on a fixed income, and that might be their one meal of the day. And they're not old enough yet to eat at the senior center. And so they come to the soup kitchen, and it gives them a place to bond and to visit with people as well.
Yeah. How many folks can you feed per meal at the soup kitchen right now? You said it was 120. Is that kind of where you guys are at?
We have a pretty large pavilion outside, so we don't limit how many we can feed. So we'll feed as many as want to come. Yeah.
Gotcha. Awesome. So the soup kitchen, which again, I think most communities have that. Were any of these services available prior to you coming along?
The soup kitchen has been available since before my time. And it was originally at Grace Episcopal Church. Yeah. So they've been doing a fabulous job. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So let me get rid of that one. And then let's talk for a moment. You mentioned not only the soup kitchen, what was the other thing that was part of the building?
The pantry.
It was the soup. Yeah. The pantry. So let me see if I've got that here somewhere.
So on the pantry, we serve about 600 households every week. So we serve a lot of households. We've done about 6.5 million pounds of food in the 7 years that we've been open, that's a lot of food. So anybody that is in a food crisis, we take at the pantry, and it's going to help tremendously when we open up our raised garden, because we can add some fresh produce to that as well.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that. That was something I thought was cool too when I had a chance to listen. So the pantry is essentially a place where somebody can come and get some stock food to take home. And because obviously there's one thing, which is providing a hot meal in the moment because somebody's hungry and they have no food right now. It's another thing when somebody says like, hey, I'm kind of can afford my house. I kind of can get by, but I just need to have some food in the cupboard so that I can make something for the kids and take care of our household. So again, beautiful. I just want to cover because there's so many needs that go into this space, and each step along the way, I want to kind of cover the places that you're helping. Because I think what you're doing is fantastic. Let's talk about for a moment the low income housing, which I know isn't just one place now. It's something you've been really expanding and doing a great job with. So talk a little bit about that project.
Yeah, and I really believe that, our affordable housing is the solution to homelessness, right? You can't solve homelessness without housing. and shelters are not the solution. So
and let me just say too, I came from Ohio, and again, the city I was talking about that I lived in, you could buy a house, literally. You could buy a house for $30,000 to $40,000. And it would not be nice, but it was a house.
Yeah.
We bought our first home for $45,000. We bought our second home for $59,000.
Wow.
And, I still own the one home back in Ohio and rent it out there. That market certainly has gone up, but not crazy. You could still buy a house today for $60,000 or $70,000.
Unbelievable.
Here today, we bought our home around $200,000 4 years ago. And now everybody says your house is worth $450,000. And it blows my mind because I have just an average home and it's nothing special. Yeah. And the fact that housing has gone up so much, there is no house in this area that you could buy for less than $250,000 to $300,000 minimum. Even a trailer home in a trailer park will cost you over $100,000. Easy.
Absolutely easy. I mean, we were just looking at some and they were 180 for a trailer house.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's going for cash. You can't even get a loan and stand in line. No, it's going for cash.
You get, it goes
No,
above the sell price. Yep. Goes
Yeah.
above the sell price from somebody in California moving this way. And so we've got this predicament where there is no affordable housing for a young couple, for a senior citizen, for somebody with a disability, somebody with mental illness who's going to be kind of in and out of work maybe at times.
Yeah. And I would say that it's you're hitting it on the head with attainable housing because, here we have students like our kids, that I don't want in my basement, anymore. So I want them to have housing that they can afford once they're graduating from college or getting a job. They need something that's attainable to them. And then you need the affordable, deeply affordable housing for somebody who is on a fixed income, like our seniors and our vets, or somebody who's, on a mental illness that is never going to make more than minimum wage. And so that is deeply affordable housing. So we need this whole spectrum of attainable housing, for everybody. Washington County's in this real crisis right now because we can't attract teachers, we can't attract policemen, firemen, nursing. We can't attract anybody that is critical to our community because they can't afford the housing here, and the positions that are open are not paying enough to pay for the housing, right? And so it's a problem. We did our first affordable housing project called Riverwalk in a partnership with the city. And so that's over by Mall Drive, by the Dinosaur Museum. And we opened it up in November of 2020. The city donated the land, and then I wrote a low income tax credit to the state to pay for the rest. And then we raised about $3 million in donations as our gap funding. And it's a 55 unit, which has 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms, which is very unusual. But when we did our market study, and you can kind of see this single mom with 4 kids, we got a problem here in Utah. There's a lot of families. And so it wasn't just, single adults. It was families that needed deeply affordable housing, right? And so that's why we did the 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms. It was full the first month that we opened, and we knew it would be, but at least it got us started. We then went into expanding into trying to purchase hotels and converting them. So we did one in Salt Lake that we opened in November of 21 for seniors and vets, and that's a 100 unit. And we have 130 seniors that are living in there. And that rent is only $450 a month. And right now, when you look at what is Social Security, the average Social Security is $782. So that gives them enough left over. And we provide their breakfast and we pay all their utilities, internet and cable. So they have enough, to get by. And then the one that we bought here in St. George is 50 units. And so we'll continue to look for projects like that to create deeply affordable housing for our low-income residents. And we're going to look at the whole state, not just Washington County for that.
I'm curious, and maybe you won't have these numbers in front of you, but say this 55 unit complex, you've got this low amount that you're asking people to pay. And that seems like a reasonable amount. I remember our first house, I think our mortgage payment was $400. That seems like something that a really low income family can handle. And like you say, a senior citizen on Social Security, and it's tight, but they can make it. Mm-hmm. Because you got the land at no charge, because you were able to get some grant money and donations, I would assume that $400 a month, you guys are able to kind of what's the word I want to use? It's sustainable, self-sustainable, that the cost that they pay.
It pays it. So it doesn't make a profit. It barely covers its utilities, right? Yeah. So, and we have to pay the management of it. So, but it's not in debt. So none of the properties that we have would need, they cover their own operations, right?
Yeah.
So
and that's important.
It's very important. Everything
it's crucial.
we do has to be self-sustaining. Right.
Yeah. No, and that's my point, is that as we go through all of this, for all of these parts and pieces to, this thing kind of pays for a little bit over here, or that thing covers itself. This gives this opportunity, which helps us take care of that. I want people to see all the organization that goes into this. So that was the first unit. You guys have added you said a second unit, right? A second building.
Here in St. George, and then another one up in Salt Lake, right?
Yeah. How many apartments or units do you guys have at this point among those 3 different projects?
Let's see, about 300.
300, man,
Yeah,
amazing. And as you're
yeah,
pointing out, I mean, in this area, you're really the only person in town who's offering housing at an affordable rate like that. Like that's to me is one of the key secrets to solving this problem is to ensure that people can have housing that they can afford. Because so many folks who are homeless just are stuck in a situation where they can't go anywhere. They don't have transportation. They're not able to just pick up and go to their car and drive to another cheap place.
right.
And they need a place to rest their head and to be able to go home every day and try to figure out how they're going to get work and hold a
Well,
job.
it's,
And
it's getting to where that there's really no other cheap places unless they go all the way to
yeah,
Ohio, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's not cheaper just anywhere else in Utah. And I mean, even in Tooele. So we expanded to Tooele, and we've got some housing there now, and we've got a homeless shelter there, and a domestic violence shelter there, and a food pantry there. And I mean, so we copied ourselves in Tooele, and it's not any cheaper in Tooele. The housing's not cheaper, and you would think because it's a smaller community, but it's not cheaper. And so it's not helping the client to kind of pick up and keep moving if we can keep them sustaining and having some support. We just got to figure out how to help with the housing piece.
just to show you, not to get off track here,
Yeah.
but this is my hometown of Sandusky, Ohio. And you can see the houses aren't great. They're not nice
Oh,
houses, but they do have running water and they do have a floor and they got a
hey,
roof and
that's
they've got,
great.
but
Yeah.
40,000, 20,000, 49,000, 7,000 for a lot, 49,000 for a
Build a
house.
community there, Bill.
Yeah.
Let's build
Yeah.
a
So, but
community and move a couple 100,000 people over there.
yeah, and there's another project, right? So, but again, for folks who are watching who live in Utah, just recognize that young families, senior citizens, people with mental illness and other difficulties that get in the way of being able to afford a $300,000 home, right?
Yeah,
And if me and my wife got divorced tomorrow, neither one of us could afford a house here, and so
that's right.
one of us or both of us have to leave.
Yeah.
All right, so the housing, incredible. I think that is a huge part of what you're doing, and love to hear about that. Let's talk for a moment about the thrift store.
Sure. So that was our first business that we decided to open. So after we'd been open a year, and realized that a lot of our clients couldn't get a job right away, we decided, hey, let's open up a thrift store. And a lot of nonprofits do that, and people were donating us items. But the nice thing about a thrift store is there's no cost of goods. And so my background was small business, and so that was an easy thing for me to say, okay, let's do that. So we opened up our first thrift store in 2016, and it's right across the street from our shelter in St. George. And that gives a great opportunity for volunteers and for our residents to work and for people to donate, and really started our job training program. And it's been a good awareness for us because a lot of people shop at the thrift store. A lot of people like to thrift. And then we opened up our boutique. So our boutique we opened up a couple years ago. That was kind of our higher end thrift store because St. George has some nice stuff, and so it gave us a chance to take the high end items and move it across town to a different location on 1,000 East and Red Hills Parkway and have a different feel. And so that's been really nice. And it has, we can teach people how to refresh furniture and repaint things. And we have donations from stores in the community that give us a lot of free stuff like Downeasters that their season's over. And so they're brand new items that are still have tags on them. And so that's been a really helpful, where it is higher priced items, for us. So those are the two kind of thrift stores in the area. We have a great thrift store in Tooele that is about 16,000 feet. So it's really big. It was an old J.C. Penney. And we refresh a lot of items in that store because we've got the room where they redo all the furniture and can repaint it. And so we're teaching our clients how to do that, how to sand stuff, how to put on different knobs, how to, put on a new fresh coat of paint or lacquer something, or put on, some material to put on a different cover, or how to recover, benches, that kind of thing. So that's been good skill sets, that they're learning.
Yeah, that to me is, again, the next step in this process is to help these folks have job opportunities where there's some understanding of what they're coming from and what they need to kind of learn or adapt to so that they can be employable and hold a job and be able to provide for themselves or for a family if they have one. And so by you creating these thrift shops, it's a place for the community to support you by going there and buying things, but also
Yeah.
you're providing job opportunities to the folks who come through.
And one thing that has been, I think, not surprising. I mean, I guess it has been, but my some of my best staff have been the ones that started off in the shelter, and then we have kept, um, because they are so loyal and they are so grateful for the opportunity, and they work so hard, and to see them thrive and to see them change and have that switch in their life and feel valued, you can't replace that. And so it's so gratifying just to see somebody just blossom and thrive in a new environment, and you just see them feeling so loved, and they don't want to screw up, right? And so that they are on time, and they do their job, typically better than anybody else, because they don't want to lose the opportunity that they've been given.
Yeah. Studying humanity, I mean, us humans need certain things to thrive, as you're pointing out. We need to feel acceptable, we need to feel loved, we need to have some sort of productivity, right? If we're not accomplishing something or doing something, we tend to kind of have a lower emotional state, a more a more negative emotional state, and sometimes depression and other things come into factors there. And
Yeah.
so by giving somebody a responsibility, giving them something where they can work and earn their own paycheck and now be able to pay for the things that are around them that they need, all of that stuff is little by little lifting somebody up and helping them to feel valued and to feel better about themselves and to be able to contribute in ways, as you're pointing out, with the folks that do this. I mean, they end up having a much better outlook on life as they begin to essentially fit those responsibilities of having a job and having a place where they're needed and making their own paycheck. And you're just doing such a great job to help these folks, and I just really appreciate you. So the boutique, let's get rid of that one. This was a cool one. I just was so man, the things you're doing. Here's a bed and biscuits. This is a pet
Yeah.
daycare, or if I'm going on vacation, can I drop my dog off here for a couple
Yep,
of days?
yep, absolutely. And
All right.
cats. So we got dogs and
Yeah.
cats. Not
Anything else
together.
besides dogs and cats?
No, no, we don't take snakes or tarantulas.
Okay.
So we we were going, some of our veterans don't do really well in the thrift store. They were really struggling, and we have a lot of our clients who have pets, and many of the shelters did not allow you to bring your dogs to shelter, and we always did that from the very beginning. But it's so flipping hot here, in St. George, that we're like, this is not working very well to have the kennels outside and it's 115. And so we really thought, let's open up a doggy daycare business, and it's done really well. So the whole thought process was, okay, number one, it gives an opportunity for you know clients who are traveling down here. It's a very popular area for tourists, and so people are down here all the time coming to visit, and so you can't take your dogs to the national parks. And so we have a lot of people who are visiting that come and drop their dogs off, or you're leaving town, like you say you go on vacation. So um, we have a pretty nice facility that's right off of Dixie Downs and Sunset, as you can see, and we had a lot of Tuacahn students help us paint the building, so it's darling. And then our upstairs is our cat area. But and then our clients who weren't doing really well in a really bustly customer service type area do awesome, and they do amazing with animals, because, as you know, animals don't judge. They don't judge, uh, tattoos and mental illness. They can judge if a character person has good character. And so we really saw people thrive when they were volunteering as and working alongside of our trainers. So, we don't, there's a little bit of the community saying, well, we just have a bunch of homeless people running your doggy daycare. No, we have qualified dog trainers who then work with our homeless individuals and teach them how to become a dog handler. But there's a real intimate bonding with an animal and a person who needs them. And dogs know that. And so it's just been a really fun thing to watch with some of our veterans, especially, who have really struggled. And those veterans have stayed permanently housed. When they've gone through the shelter, they've worked at Bed and Biscuits, and they found themselves. And they've learned how to love themselves because of this experience.
Yeah. Awesome. You're right. Like, folks who are going to, the reason I'm stammering, Carol, just to pause for a moment, the reason I'm stammering is because I want to use the right language, because these people deserve respect as we're talking about the difficulties that their life has. And I'm just making sure I choose my words carefully. And if I offend anybody in any way, like, I welcome somebody reaching out and say, hey, it really sounds better if you word it this way or say it that way. And so I'm sorry that I'm stumbling a little bit over my words. I normally don't, but this is an issue where I want to talk about it and I want to hit it from all angles, but I want to make sure that I'm being respectful to the people that your nonprofit serves and supports and helps. So as you pointed out, I mean, the folks who are going to maybe bring an animal to you, to cat or dog, to be watched, there's always this, when you don't know how things work, you fear the worst because you love your pet. But as you point out, just like any other job, there's supervision and there's supervisors. And the folks who are new to serving in this capacity are going to have a serious amount of supervision.
That's
and
right.
Once somebody demonstrates that they're responsible, just like in any other job, they get the chance to have more autonomy and less supervision. And that's the way it should work.
That's right.
Yeah. Beautiful. So that was a cool one. I was really just kind of tickled and kind of chuckled when I saw that you guys were doing that. I could never have imagined the far scope of what you guys are doing. So really cool. Let's talk for a moment. I don't know why it's not opening. It was open this morning.
What was that one?
The crossrecovery.org.
Oh, crossover recovery.
Yeah, sorry, crossoverrecovery.org. For whatever reason, that website isn't working at the moment. But
I don't know why.
Yeah, it was working this morning, but no biggie. Okay. Talk about that for a minute, the Recovery Center.
Okay. So, again, we were, one of the big things, I'll just point that out, is every time we see a gap in our clients' journey and they're not being served by another agency or by the community, we have to step up to the plate, right? I mean, we just can't let it go. And so we're like, man, no one is serving the Medicaid clients in substance use. It doesn't make enough money. There's lots of drug rehab if you are private pay. It's big money if you are private pay drug rehab. And so we thought, we got to do it. We have to, because it's such a big problem. And we get them from jail, and then they come to shelter, and then they go back to the street because no landlord wants them. And so it's just the cycle that was happening. So we opened up a rehab center 3 years ago up in Hilldale, and it was a perfect home. It had 19 bedrooms and 14 baths, and so it was a good setting to handle men that needed recovery. And so that environment allows us to have them, between 60 and 90 days, have a really intensive therapeutic environment. And then we move them from that to housing. And then we can keep them in an intensive outpatient environment. And they can do that with us, or we can, get them hooked up with someone else. But normally they'll continue with ours because Medicaid will continue that. And then we can help place them into jobs. So we're trying to create that continuum of care and allow them to get back into society, right? Because normally, if you have somebody who's had a big history of drug use, usually there's criminality with that, and there's a lot of prison time with that. And so we're trying to break that stigma and break those patterns, right? And so that's why we created Crossover Recovery.
Love it. You mentioned men. Is this a male only facility?
It's a male only facility, right?
Yeah, and talk about that for a moment. I understand. I'm guessing that there are logistical problems and some concern about having that be not just men. And
You know,
so
we started it for the first 6 weeks as dual, and it was a
yeah,
very, very bad idea. Um,
yeah,
um, they were too focused on each other instead of recovery for that first 6 weeks. So,
totally. That makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. So we'll try and look at female house down the road, but it's
Yeah.
not a good idea to put them together.
Is it significantly more men than women that are in that predicament?
Um, in our in our situation, yes. We know that there's women, that we deal with, that are on Medicaid and that need it. But we do have more men. So I would say right now it's probably 70-30%.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. That's kind of what I would have expected. All right. So, how many folks? You said you had 19 beds, 14 baths, correct?
Yeah. So we can
Okay.
have we're licensed to do 42 men up there, but we like to keep it around 30, 32.
Gotcha.
That's about as
Perfect.
much as you want to handle.
Love it. Yeah, another great, again, if we're going to help out this segment of our society, we've got to have some response to those who struggle with addiction of one sort or another, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So beautiful. Love that as well. All right. So there is that. Let's talk for a moment. Let's see here. So this is, I couldn't find a thing on your site yet, but this is something you guys are in the middle of working on, if I'm not mistaken. This is not up and running yet, correct?
Which one?
This is, oh, I'm sorry. I got to put it up on the screen, don't I? This is the 24/7 child care facility.
Okay, so yeah, so the pictures, yes, too bad you couldn't have the pictures that are almost done. So this will be done next week. So it'll be,
Gotcha.
yep. In fact, if you go to switchpointchildcare.org, pull that up.
SwitchPointChildcare.org. Ooh, I think I spelled that wrong. Give me a second. Oh,
So there's
look at
our,
that.
that's ta-da. So that's the join so they can join the waiting list now. So yeah, we'll be finished next week. And so this again was a gap. And as we were working with families that are in poverty, they get non-traditional working hours. So you work weekends, you work night shifts, you even have to work till 7 o'clock at night, or you work a swing shift. There's no childcare. And so we were seeing that it was keeping families in poverty because they couldn't take the job that was paying more at Family Dollar Distribution or Walmart or Lighthouse, because they didn't have any childcare. So we decided to open up this 24/7 childcare, because it would allow families to have an affordable, safe, accessible place for their children to be while they accepted those non-traditional hours. So we're really excited for this to open up, and it's on 200 East and Tabernacle, and it is turning out just absolutely adorable. There's vouchers that families qualify for through Department of Workforce Services that help them pay for childcare if they're eligible, and then if not, they can pay their tuition. But most of the families that we work with are eligible for a childcare subsidy.
Love it. Just for the purpose of transparency, who watches the kids here? Like, what's the situation in this term?
So we have highly qualified staff. In fact, our director has a master's in early childcare development, and she's highly qualified. She's worked for the state as well as Fife County in childcare development, and so then her staff is also trained. And so there's lead teachers in each one of those age groups. So we'll take infants up to 11 years old. Mm-hmm. And then, so every one of those staff members will have, CPR and first aid trained. And we know that these children there's something about ACEs, and I want to talk about that for a second. And ACE is an adverse childhood experience. And many children that live in poverty experience them one way or another. And so an adverse childhood experience can be a parent has been incarcerated, or a parent has they've seen drug use from a parent, or they've seen, you know, but violence in the home or violence against themselves. And so there's like 19. Some scores, you know, use 19. Some scores use 30. But these adverse childhood experiences can really dictate how the child turns out, you know, in layman's terms, and what kind of criminal behavior, or you know, I want to say it. We're trying to say, if we can eliminate some of these ACE experiences for them, or help them overcome them at an early age,
Yeah.
we think that we can break the cycle of poverty for them, because they're going to experience something different than if they wouldn't have had this experience with us at Stepping Stones. Does that make sense?
Yeah, instead of being reactive to a problem that's already in front of you because someone shows up at the shelter, you're now trying to affect children's lives so that these aren't folks who are going to need your program later on, and hence you're also again diminishing the number of people who are in a place in life where they need this support. All
Right.
right, the goal is to help these folks and to reduce the number of these folks if at all possible.
Right. And even if they're
Yeah.
experiencing at home, they're going to get the opposite in their life while they're. So instead of being an 8-year-old and being the primary caregiver, which creates an ACE in itself, now that 8-year-old gets the support and guidance that they need. And so we're hoping to kind of flip those over on its head by keeping these children in a safe environment.
Yeah, and as you're pointing out, I mean, there are situations where, it's a single mom. The only way that she can get by is she has some job that works the evening or works the night shift. And in the past, these parents in these situations are stuck between a Sophie's choice of allowing their oldest kid who isn't old enough to watch the younger kids
Yeah.
and essentially leave their home alone with these children in it, or to have some sort of resource like this, or not go to work. And
Right.
the latter really isn't an option because it ends up just compounding the problem.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was talking with Christy Pike, who's the director of Washington Children's Justice Center, and that's exactly the same thing that they are dealing with all the time, is these ACE scores, right? And we're seeing these same types of children. And so if we can look at this together as, okay, we don't want the 8-year-old being the primary caregiver, because things can happen when they don't know how to address a stranger coming into the home. And so if we can we can have the capacity for 275 children a day during a 24-hour period at Stepping Stones. That's taking a lot of these children who are in a vulnerable situation, kind of out of that dangerous situation and putting them in a safe space. So I think it's going to be a big game changer. You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. So let's add up. Yeah, and I think, by the way, great thing. I think that is tackling the problem from multiple angles, and really love it. This was another cool thing that I thought I kind of chuckled at and thought, man, you guys are just doing so much more than I would have thought you were doing. Talk to us about this Rise Garden.
Oh my gosh! And yesterday I was up there, and our first little baby plants are like a half an inch big in their little trays. They're going to get put into their towers here in another week or so. But yeah, so during COVID, I did a pitch to Community Foundation of Utah, and to talk about, hey, we really were in a food desert during COVID, and we barely got anything during our grocery rescue from Utah Food Bank. And it wasn't Utah Food Bank's fault. It's there wasn't enough coming from the grocery stores as leftovers. And so I wrote this grant to build this huge greenhouse with all these towers so that we could produce fresh greens and herbs and tomatoes and strawberries for ourselves. And we have a garden, but the garden was reliant on culinary water, and it's very hot here. And so I just felt like we were wasting a lot. So this will save us about 98% water and 90% power, and we'll be able to produce 100,000 plants a year in our garden, in this greenhouse. And so we have 170 towers that look just like this, and we just did our first 5,000 plants that are in their little trays, and so we'll be doing our first harvest in June. So we're really excited about how this can be added to our nutritional database for our clients, both in our soup kitchen and in our pantry, but we'll also be selling it to the community and to some local restaurants. So next business coming soon.
Man, I love it. And as you're pointing out, I mean, we live in an area that for all practical purposes, there's almost no rainwater a year, right?
Yeah.
And all of our water comes from various other places. And there's a lot of communities all across the country that create gardens like this, but you've really taken seriously the conserving of water and energy. And so that's a really kind of a cool feature as well to what you're doing. And as you're pointing out, this will supply food in lots of other directions. As you pointed out, there's going to even be private places that buy from you to supplement what they're doing. I just think that's incredible. You've got to be really proud of all.
The water comes from those little tubs at the bottom and recirculates. And so every hour it comes from the bottom tub and the tank and goes up to the top and then trickles down. So it only waters itself 5 minutes every hour. And so you just have zero waste. And so once it's recirculated so many times, then we just will put it onto our grass. And the only thing that you add to it is trace minerals. There's no fertilizer. There's no, nothing that, we can't call it organic because there's no soil, but it is truly a really healthy way to go. So it'll be exciting.
You froze up there for just a moment. Sorry about that. No biggie. Yeah. So it's a really productive, healthy way to do this. And you're really tackling it really well. Again, super impressed. Let me pull that off the screen for just a moment. And then essentially at that point, those are kind of all the things that I'm aware of that you're doing. I'm curious if there's any other facets that we didn't list out there, but also are there any other big ideas that are kind of being thought about at the moment?
Yeah, you didn't get my Muffin Tops.
Oh, I don't even know what that is. What are we doing here?
So in Salt Lake, so when we opened up our hotel, it had a great kitchen that we remodeled. And Seinfeld, back in the day, had some great episodes. And so, the Muffin Tops was a funny one. And so our Muffin Top kitchen business is where we have a lot of our little residents there that they're all seniors, and our average age up there is 72, but they are working to earn a little bit of extra money off their Social Security, but they help us bake muffins, and then we sell them to vending to go into large businesses around the Silicon Valley, the Silicon Slopes, to put in the vending machines at these big businesses. And so our muffin business, we have just started, and we hope to be doing up to 2,000 muffins a day. And so it's just the tops. I mean, has a very little bottom and a big top, and so Muffin Tops.
My favorite part of the muffin anyway, right?
Exactly. It's the best part of the muffin. So Muffin Tops, so that's our latest business, is our Muffin Top business.
That's what I do. I tear the top off and eat that first, and then I kind of don't enjoy the rest of it as much.
Pick at the bottom.
Yeah. Love it. Is there any website for that, or is that kind of its own separate thing away from all of this?
Yeah, we're just working on our website, and so I'll have to shoot it to you next. We should have it done here.
No sweat, but that's another cool thing. So now you're essentially getting into retail. You're selling a product. So again, it provides a job opportunity. It's got income coming in. Beautiful. Again, can't say enough about that. Any other ideas that are kind of coming down the pike? Or anything else you want to mention in terms of that before we get into just talking about the reach that you're having and how people can be supportive of what you're doing?
No, those are all the great ideas for today.
Okay, love it.
We'll
love it.
Leave that alone. We'll get into what's going on next. Yeah.
Cool. So let's go over some of the ways in which people can help. I'll throw some things up on the screen. You can tell folks about what these are. This one here says the SwitchPoint Society. What's this?
So that's just our monthly donor base. It's really important for us when people pledge on a monthly basis. It helps us kind of budget out long term. And instead of doing a one time, it allows somebody to say, hey, I'll do $100 a month or $40 a month or whatever that number is. It just allows us to say, okay, great. That helps us figure out what we could do, to help so many families. And you can kind of see, as an example, $40 a month can provide bus passes, or, $100 a month provides 50 hot meals at the soup kitchen. So it just allows us to take that amount of money and know what we can do on a monthly basis. So that's what the SwitchPoint Society does. And it just helps us build up our donor base on a long term. Yeah.
And just, doing a nonprofit on this side, recurring donation, somebody who sets up $10 a month or $15 a month.
Deal. Yeah.
It gives me and our board of directors and our podcasters who we pay, it gives them some sense that, hey, this is working. We can count on it. It's dependable.
Yeah.
And so for folks who are out there, if you're looking at this presentation on SwitchPoint and you're thinking about donating, I'll tell you my 2 cents. If you're going to give $100 one time, if you gave $10 a month instead, it helps Carol and her staff be able to plan better on what they can do with your money.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives them a lot more security knowing that next year the donations will be in a certain range, and so that they can plan better for the future as well. So
we try not to inundate people, with a bunch of spam, but we do like to keep people in the know. So when you do join the SwitchPoint Society, we do tell you about, hey, we're doing this garden. Do you want to know about it? Or, hey, we just opened a doggy daycare. So we try and let our donors who are regular know what we're up to next, and it makes them feel like, hey, at least I'm part of your society now. Yeah.
Oh, this one is in-kind needs.
Yeah, and that's huge for us because, as you know, in kind, if we don't get it by in kind, we got to buy it, and it takes a lot to operate. I think now we've got 17 different kinds of locations, and so when you're thinking about toilet paper, we got a lot of people, right? And so, or garbage sacks, or when you paper plates or anything like that. So when you look at, we try and keep it fresh. Well, we do keep it fresh because we know exactly what we're running out of on certain things. So anytime somebody wants to do a drive with their neighborhood, you'll notice on what are the things that we're running out of, or what are the things that are the top 10 things that we got to have. So those in kind that you can come and drop off anytime at SwitchPoint, those are huge to us on in kind donations. We just had a great group from a real estate office yesterday, came and did a drive, plus they helped us put together about 50 towers. So Joe Ayer's real estate group came yesterday and helped us. And so you'll see a soup kitchens shopping list, and then our regular shelters list.
Love it. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
There's that. Now, volunteer opportunity.
Yeah. So we cannot do this without a huge, cadre of volunteers. It cannot be done. I mean, my budget would just be outrageous. It's already huge. If I had to do everything I do with staff, it would just be crazy. We need volunteers in every single facet. And so when you look at all these different kinds of opportunities for volunteering, there's a lot of things that people could do to help us. And now we got to add on our whole garden aspect, because there's going to be it says gardening there, but now we got to change it to our tower garden, because that's going to be different. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on here, and we do require and ask our residents to do a lot of stuff too, but it's just a lot of stuff that goes on to meet the needs of the thousands that we serve every single day.
Man, love it. Love it. I'm anticipating being most likely fully retired next year, and I've already been thinking I need to go back out and put a day or two out into the community. So January 1st, sometime around then, I'm sure you're going to hear from me. So yeah, I'm excited to work with you. I think you're doing great things. So there's that. Shop Amazon. That's a simple one. People, the trouble, the trouble here, and we do this too. The trouble here is it really needs to be in front of the person all the time, right? Like every time they go to Amazon, they have to go to this thing. So my 2 cents.
Yeah, you can set it up as that being your the login part is that Friends of SwitchPoint is your login as the Smile Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah, the easiest way to do it is just to put up into the top. So for instance, where I've got, I think up here somewhere I had Amazon, but maybe not. But Amazon just on the top of my little dashboard, having it up there and having it already connected to that smile, so that every time I go to order something off Amazon, a couple cents goes to the charity that I select.
Yeah.
And so for folks who want to support SwitchPoint, figure out a way that you don't have to think about it every time. And you go to Amazon and it automatically puts you as putting a few cents towards SwitchPoint.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. Cool on that one. And then legacy giving. Thoughts there?
That's a big deal. We have a lot of people who are retiring, like you, Bill. And so, legacies, the only way to really create sustainability, I won't be here forever, and neither will you. And so when you think about what keeps a nonprofit that wants to do good things sustainable, it's really people who start to leave legacies and put their nonprofit in their will. And so that takes a while to build up, right? And so we really want people to start thinking about that. And Best Friends has done a great job doing that. They've been around a long, long time, but we want people to think about us too. So we're really trying to get that out there to say, hey, put us in your legacy. And it's pretty easy to do, but any portion we'll be happy with.
Yeah, and this is a big deal too. I've got a friend who up in Kanab and works for Best Friends, and we're just talking about nonprofits, hers and the one she works for and ours. And it's a big deal for an entity like yours, again, to have some sense of funding coming in the future, and folks who have already gotten maybe to the backside of life and they've got some extra money around and they want to do some good in the world. SwitchPoint is doing, I think, a fantastic job. And the biggest thing I think when people are giving is they want whatever they give to be responsible with their funds. And as you can see through today's conversation, Carol and her staff are just doing a beautiful job of expanding and continually trying to find new ways to help a segment of our society that needs some help. Yeah. And so thank you. Yeah. There's that. And I think that's the last one, because the next one up is the 24/7 childcare, which we've already talked about. Yeah. Any other thoughts from you on, again, our society right now seems really fragile. And, I'm watching my investments over the last couple of weeks go down. It's been turbulent over the last couple of years. And it makes me nervous. Like any moment, things could be much more difficult than they are today. And which is also makes you kind of knowing what funds are coming and being able to get your word out so that folks who want to give have access to give to your charity, to give to your nonprofit, to help you guys. Any other thoughts from you on folks either supporting you guys or things you're doing or anything else you want to say that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, people ask is, how do we know it's working? Is our approach working better than other shelter approaches or other, nonprofit approaches? And I'm going to say undoubtedly yes. And the reason I think that is, we have gotten a lot of calls from other areas, other states, and that's why we're expanding. It's not because I have been searching for them, but because they're searching us out, right? So like Tooele, they called us in October of 19, and now here we are building a pretty big campus up there. It's a 10-acre campus that will house 66 permanent supportive housing units, plus a big shelter and 24/7 childcare center. So we're duplicating the entire thing all over again in Tooele. And then again in Salt Lake, and where they called us, and then we went up and ran an overflow, and then ended up just saying, hey, let's just buy the hotel where we were. And so as we look at that kind of approach and say, it cannot be Band-Aids. We are in an environment that is so volatile, and like you're saying, we don't know what's going to happen, but we know it can't be that good. And so we're going to continue to be as aggressive as we can, and I think that the cities and counties that are approaching us know that. And so we're going to continue to grow in that area because we want to solve a problem. And when our approach can be copied, right? And we are going to be implementing it into other communities. And we want people to call us for that, because I see this as a solvable problem. And I don't want our vulnerable population to be on the street when they don't have to be. And so to me, I just think, as you know, as a parting kind of parting comment would be, you know what, if all of us could have that one moment of reflection, which would be what I would call a rear view mirror moment of, I wished I would have looked back. It's do something now, right? If you didn't do it before because you thought you were too busy, or you had, you know, other things on your plate, do something now to help the vulnerable population, and change the world, you know, and because it has to be done, and it can't be all on just, you know, a few of us that are paddling as fast as we can, right? And so I just see us, I see us having a lot of impact, you know, at SwitchPoint, but I see us needing a lot of people coming to the table and saying, hey, I've got a few acres, I'll donate it to you if you can put some houses on it. You know, whether that's tiny home communities or whether it's, you know, building more things on it. But we will continue, but we need people to understand the issues of homelessness, and that's not always just about people who are, you know, criminals. It's about truly people who don't have the means to do any better.
Yeah, there's a lot of places out there doing good in the world, and they all need funding, they all need support. But this, you know, if you're in Utah, you know, you're not just serving Southern Utah. You have now got facilities and doing projects and helping out people in various areas. So one, it's serving you the greater Utah area, which I think is just amazing. Number two, it to that degree, it's local. Number three, you've been responsible, from all that I've seen and heard, and from feedback from others and from the various projects that you guys have, you're being responsible with funding. You're serving a segment of society that is in great need. And so for folks out there who want to do some good in the world, I can't think of a better thing to send your money to than SwitchPoint. And I say that as somebody who wants donations, right? I'm running a nonprofit. And I would say, if you're listening to this and you want to do great good in the world, skip sending something to Mormon Discussion and send it to SwitchPoint. I think you're helping real people in real time. And so thank you very much for your time this morning, Carol. And
Thanks for having me.
yeah, I appreciate you. And I know of you, and I consider you a friend from a distance, and just think you're amazing at what you and your staff are doing.
Well, thanks so much. Really appreciate you.
All right. Okay. Have an awesome day, and and get back at it.
All right. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Have a great, take it easy. Bye-bye.